And I'd like to kick off this webinar with Reggie here. About Reggie, Reggie is an SEO manager focused on content and SEO. She's also the co-founder and content lead for B-DigitalUK, a community for Black digital marketers. Reggie has been in the industry for almost 5 years and is passionate about tackling diversity and inclusion. B-DigitalUK is a digital marketing platform aimed at Black people, and they help showcase and inspire Black talent. Should you have any questions along the way, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A model. And Reggie here would love to answer them in real time. So without further ado, Reggie, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you guys for joining this webinar. And I'm hoping to take you through content briefs and how to SEO optimize them. So a bit about me. So I'm Rejoice. As mentioned before, I'm an SEO manager working at Incubator. I've been in SEO for around 5 years, from a graduate level to where I am now. I mostly specialize in content, but I do sort of work with technical or local SEO, but where I mostly sit and have been sitting is within content in itself. So in terms of this webinar, so we'll be talking about content briefs. We'll be going through different aspects of what is a content brief and how do we optimize it from an SEO perspective. So what do we need to look at within our content briefs? And ideally, when you're working with freelancers or freelance writers or content writers, understanding what do you need to provide them for them to be able to write that optimized content. And for whatever goals you have, whether it's to generate traffic, whether it's to convert users, all of those things. So we will be learning what content brief is. We'll be highlighting the different elements that goes into an SEO-focused content brief. And we'll also know the different tips in terms of writing, what are useful, what you can utilize. So we're going to start with the what. So what is a content brief? So a content brief is described as a document that helps you and your writers to understand what you want from your content and how you want it to be done. A lot of content briefs tend to be quite simplistic. So they usually have what the topic is about. Sometimes they might have who the audience for that content brief or for that content essentially. And also they might also have information around maybe the headings. But we'll go into a bit more in terms of SEO. So what then makes a content brief SEO focused? Essentially, for it to be focused, it's unique in the sense that the goal is to instruct the writer in creating content for a target specific query. And that is for the purpose to either earn traffic from organic search channels. So again, we want to focus on the target specific query and understanding with that query, what sort of content can we provide? Knowing that would then help you dictate how you sort of look and how you sort of approach creating that content brief for your writers. But what if we don't use content briefs? What if we absolutely just ignore it? What are the implications of that? So firstly, there'll be way too much back and forth in terms of your writers might be confused along the way and start, having email threads around what can they include, what can't they include, maybe asking what your vision is. Another implication would be they'll have an inappropriate approach towards SEO. They wouldn't know essentially how to fit their content into an SEO specific way. They have no guidance. They have no place for them to work out what is the difference between this query and this intent and that intent. And lastly, there's too many rooms for misunderstandings. We don't want any misunderstandings between our writers. We do not want our writers to be confused. And that is why a content brief will help us tackle that and help us look into how we can effectively communicate what we want our writers to know and how we want them to approach the specific content we have in mind. Essentially, a content brief is taking what you have in your head, putting on paper so someone else can then translate that for you either long form or short form type of content. But now is the why. Why why is it needed? So what are the benefits? And one of the benefits of an SEO focused content brief is you minimize the cost, and minimize the cost in the sense of you can basically do part of the work. So creating the content brief and then sending it to the writers, you've minimized the cost of the writers now creating their own content briefs for them to be able to tackle this project. You're improving your search rankings because it is SEO focused. So you're actually thinking about what is the best for the user. How will the user interpret what we're giving them? Does this answer the user's question? And in doing so, you are actually helping yourself improve your search rankings because, again, targeting that specific search query. You're increasing your consistency. So you know that the way in which your content is being written, is being approached, is consistent. So you have consistent content that is SEO optimized, that is thought about from a user perspective first. And you're hitting deadlines. If you think about, as we said earlier, the back and forth, having too many back and forth can push deadlines, can cause a lot of pauses within the process. But having a content brief allows you to hit the deadline because you've created the content brief. You can then work out how long you need them for. Again, you're being very specific, very intentional. Another way is to educate clients and writers because, again, some of the writers and clients don't understand SEO or understand how to approach. But if we can, pour out the SEO focused content briefs and write it in a specific way that is optimized, we're essentially educating our clients around what it takes to actually add into the content brief for us to be SEO friendly. So again, there's a benefit of doing that. And you're creating scalable formats. If you have different content briefs for infographics all the way to long forms or blogs in general, you can have different specific briefs that are able to be scalable over time. So you may not have to always create a new content brief. You can actually have a basic content brief that's still SEO focused, a basic template, and you can actually regurgitate that and maybe switch out certain things, switch out certain fields, again, allow you to scale up. Instant duplication, so it's literally copy and paste or make a copy of a content brief. Again, you can duplicate it for different topics. It might be the same format. So let's say, for example, you want to write two different type of blogs. One is for, transactional queries. One's for informational. You can duplicate how the layout is. You can duplicate the fields. Again, it makes it easier for you in order for you to share your vision with the writers. And faster delivery, because we are actually adding this to the process, because it's already optimized, we're reducing the amount of times we are doing reviews or process check-ins, and that allows us to have a faster delivery of our content. So if we're working towards certain campaigns, certain seasonal campaigns such as Mother's Day, Valentine's Day, Black Friday, those sort of campaigns, the deadlines become faster because your briefs are already optimized in itself for the writers to just get on with it and actually understand what they're trying to do. Now for the how, this is, understanding what a content brief is and understanding why it's needed. It's great, but we need to actually know how can we make it SEO focused and what should actually be included within the content briefs. And please feel free to ask me questions along the way that I'm happy to answer it as I'm going. So we have the information. So these are the information we need to think about when we're looking at content briefs. We're looking at the title tag, meta description. We're looking at suggested word counts or CTA, keyword and search intent, formats and outlines, internal and external linking, and competitor example. I'll break all of these down to understand why we should include them and how does this benefit SEO. So if we start with keyword and search intent, I've put them into the order of instance I thought is important. So keyword and search intent. A key tip is your keywords and your search intent should always be at the top of the brief. So your search intent is a way for you to communicate what type of interaction the user and reader is likely looking for. Now, we all know that search intents are transactional, informational, navigational, commercial. Again, so if we're having an informational brief, which is we know that the user just wants to find out information about a particular product, about a particular service, about a particular topic in general. So the content brief, we will state in our content brief, searcher's intent is informational. And again, you can define this for your writers. You can tell them exactly what informational query is. And then we will also be adding those informational keywords. We want to make sure that the keywords we're adding are very specific to the intent. So we don't want to have an informational brief where the keywords are all transactional. That doesn't actually feed into, nor it is a huge contradictory to what you're trying to do. And the main goal of having your keywords, again, is to rank on search engines, but you want to be able to have a primary keyword. So have one primary keyword that you are going to essentially focus the content around because it is so relevant to the topic. And yes, search volumes will come into play. So your primary keyword should have a good enough search volume because you know that loads of people are searching for these keywords, and therefore we can actually look into how we can create that content around that keyword. It doesn't mean we should forget about secondary phrases as well. So providing secondary phrases can be misunderstood in the sense of your secondary phrases can cause confusion with your writers because they might not be too sure what keyword they should use. So it's always good to specify a primary keyword and a secondary keyword. Your secondary keyword should be, in essence, variations of the primary keyword. It shouldn't be completely different to the topic. So if we're talking about the keyword is around, I don't know, learning SEO. So you want to learn SEO. So you can have variants of the keyword in terms about SEO courses and SEO tools. All of those are still quite specific to learning SEO. You don't want to have your primary keyword is learning SEO and your secondary keyword is PPC or something else. That is completely different. You want to keep it quite close together.
Hey, Reggie, before you continue, we have a question from an attendee who asks, can we have an example of navigational and commercial intent? They say they're mostly familiar with informational and transactional.
Yeah, so navigational intent is basically a way for you to, so it's keywords that leads you to either a particular landing page. So you want your intent. So an easy way to kind of define it is any keywords that's either leading you to a website, so website or landing page. So people can search things like I don't know, TJ Maxx near me would be a navigational keyword because they're looking for a specific place for them to either visit the place or visit location. So you can essentially and also other one transactional. So transactional keywords are keywords that tell you the user wants to do something, download, buy, those kind of keywords. Where can I buy black shoes? So where can I, download Call of Duty? It's actually signifying to tell you that it's trying to do something. So those kind of keywords will be transactional, navigational, is trying to point you to either finding a website or a particular place. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I would add to that then from a transactional standpoint, what would you define as transactional? Since I guess I could see how some people might say, buy shoes or something is a transactional type query. And how is that different than commercial?
So in terms, I think commercial is I think commercial is mostly, it can be defined if it's in the near future. I would say it differs in the sense of when people search best washing machines in 2022. So that could tell you, okay, this is maybe they're looking for something in the now, they're trying to buy it now. Transactional keywords would be the intent is to purchase, but it doesn't really actually help to say when they're going to purchase. So someone might just put in a product. So they might say IKEA lamp or IKEA something. So that is telling you that they're looking for a particular product. They know the products already. They absolutely just want to, to see more information on this particular product that may lead to a transaction. Commercial is essentially in the near future. So maybe they're trying to do comparisons. They're trying to understand which one's the best one before they purchase. That gives a clearer intent that whether someone is actually willing to purchase today versus the next month or versus, the next 2 months in a way. That's how I would look at commercial versus transaction.
Got it. Yeah. And then I have, I guess, another question here is how do you navigate the conversation with a client who, say, wants to rank for, we'll call it a commercial keyword or a transactional keyword, like, best vacuum cleaners, and they don't want to include any links out to their competitors or to competitive brands? How does that kind of conversation work? Because, right, as we see in the slide, the main goal of SEO content is to rank and drive organic traffic and ultimately give users answers to their questions. But a piece of content that has very strict brand restrictions placed on it is unlikely to do so. How would you go about navigating that sort of a conversation?
I think the first thing I would do is maybe look at for them to be a competitor, that means you either have similar services or products. So maybe look at an alternative service and product that you offer that you can maybe then talk about and say, I guess this service is great. However, then start maybe using a bit of internal linking to essentially your own page. So we can definitely approach clients and kind of ask them, how would their services differ? So that way we can then structure the article and then add in an internal link from the actual homepage. So you can keep everything quite within without having to actually link out to competitors. You can look at what categories within your site is doing quite well that's related to that topic you're talking about. What particular pages are related? Have they ever written a blog before about this topic? Again, using internal linking to kind of drive traffic within the site. And that way, clients are not too worried about, we don't want competitors to be on our homepage or on our content, which is absolutely fine because, you don't want to promote another brand. So keep everything quite internal, keep everything quite within. Internal linking is great, and you can, utilize anchor text quite well. So, calling out the service you're offering, calling out the product as the name, or maybe you can be quite cheeky and maybe call out the competitor's name, but use the internal link within your own site. So again, you're attributing that anchor text to you as a client and not to your competitor.
Brilliant, brilliant. Never thought about it like that.
Ooh.
That's it. Oh, well, one more.
Yep.
Alex says, I have a suggestion about targeting best keywords. Happy to share. We'll come back to that in just a second, but go ahead.
Awesome. So the next one we want to look at is title, tag, and meta description. And why I say this is quite important to have within your content brief is because, again, that educational aspect for your writers and the clients, for them to see what the title tag or title, meta title, meta description will be. And again, you can show them how you've embedded the keyword within that. So again, utilizing SEO best practice is a great way to preview what that blog post or what that content is going to look like on the landing page from Google's perspective. There are tools such as SEO-MOFO that helps you kind of copy and paste to see if it fits within the character limitations. So that's a nice tool that I tend to use when doing any metadata suggestions. I will use that tool, see how it looks on the, on Google search results page. If I'm happy with it, then I'll put it within the content brief and say, hey, this is what the topic is about. This is how it looks in terms of the meta title, meta description. So the writers don't have to worry. If you do want the writers to write the meta title, metadata, find out first if they are very much aware about SEO. If not, provide the guidance in terms of character limitations. So the title being maximum 55 characters, the description being maximum 160 characters. So, but I would always suggest if you're writing the brief, put the meta title descriptions within the brief. It just makes things a lot easier. They can actually see what that page is going to look like from Google's perspective, and they actually know how to utilize that keyword, that primary keyword that you suggested. Awesome. So the next one I will talk about is, again, that competitor examples. Now, this is not to say we're going to add competitors' titles into our briefs, but what this does is maybe giving your writers the competitor examples of, these are what the competitors have done with the topic that I'm trying to write about. Can we mimic in a way that, can we see either if they've answered particular questions, if they've utilized that keyword well? A good way to find your competitor, I would say, is not looking at the competitors of the entire company. Take your primary keyword, throw it onto Google, see what comes up on the first page, see what brands come up on the first page, see how Google has attributed that keyword into the content it's providing. That would give you an idea of, okay, how do I need to approach this content? How do I want the writers to approach this content? Provide them with those competitive examples, because they can start seeing, okay, they want the article to be almost similar in terms of maybe structuring, in terms of maybe tone of voice, in terms of maybe how they've utilized the same keyword throughout the content. That competitive example is honestly so valuable to see, and also it's good to show your clients that, you know, the keyword project management is showing these types of content. So should we be writing a blog when our competitors are doing an infographic? That's the kind of questions will start to come up. Again, that can then inform the type of content briefs you need to make for your writers, and adding that in will absolutely help them. Yes.
Totally. Yeah, no.
So a better clear scope one, yeah.
I know, clear scope shout outs here. But yeah, I guess, what are your thoughts about plagiarism, right? And I mean, I recommend that you take a look at what competitors are doing. You also have a sentence down here, right? How can I make our piece of content more valuable and better to the end consumer? But what if a lot of the things that the competitor is mentioning are just things that you're like, yeah, you know, these are things that we should be talking about as well? How do you kind of balance the edge of using competitor examples to inform how your content brief or structure should look like, but not, you know, cross the line in terms of just simply pure regurgitation as to what everybody else is doing? How do you feel about that?
Oh, I think for me, it's great to see in terms of, a lot of times there's niches that hasn't been, you know, answered yet. So if, for example, you find the competitors, okay, you agree with what they've written, maybe look at, is there a niche that they haven't covered yet? So a lot of times competitors use more short tail keywords as primary keywords, and a good way to find a niche is maybe approach it from a long tail perspective. So maybe start asking, okay, with this content, are there any whys, hows, you know, type of questions attached to this topic that the competitors has not really gone into? Maybe within their own article, they've touched upon a really, really good subject. And again, that could be another pillar that veers off into that particular topic. So you may not write about the overarching topic, but for your content, you might decide, I'm going to specifically focus on this niche. Again, giving you an edge over your competitors. Essentially, still the same topic, but you just approach it at a different angle. And maybe you don't have to follow the same format. Is there a better format? Is a blog the best way to answer the topic? Is it an infographic? Is it a guide or a guide you can create? You're thinking about not just what they're writing, how do they write it, what formats are they using, maybe the images that they're using as well. Is it relevant to the article? And also think about the niche as well. So that's how I would approach it in terms of competitor analysis.
Lovely. Yeah. So use it as inspiration to basically find gaps in what they might not be talking about as well, and then fill in those gaps with either key sections or brand new pieces of content on your
Absolutely,
site.
absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's a good cheat sheet to use without completely plagiarizing from your competitors.
Totally. Nice.
So we come back to internal and external links. As we said earlier, I would also include it in the content brief. I would also not external links. I guess maybe if you're a freelancer, you're a freelance SEO person, you don't have time to write on your own site, but you don't mind linking to everyone else, which is fine. You can use external links, which is great. And external links will help in terms of when you think about external links, think about authority scores, domain authority. Are you linking out to someone that is of relevant topic or someone that's of more authority than you? That's the kind of questions. But a lot of times, when I do content briefs, the client only wants internal links. So I will put the internal links that are doing quite well on the site within the article. So let's say, for example, I am writing an article about Black Friday and I'm working for a watch company. They want to talk about Black Friday watches or what are the best ones to buy. So within the content brief, I would look at all the categories. Do they have a Black Friday specific landing page? Do they have a sales page? Do they have a branding page? Let's say within the article, I decide to write about Hugo Boss. I write about Omani, for example. I will look at my client's website and say, do you have these brand specific pages that I can use as internal links? Again, that's what I would totally add within the content brief. So I have a section that says internal links, and I'll add those links in, and I'll give a prompt to the writer that utilize these links. Sometimes what I would do is within the when I'm writing the outline, and I'll go into outlines in a second. When I'm writing the outline, if a header is Hugo Boss, I would put that link underneath that header just so they see that this belongs here. Again, you want to be as nitty-gritty as possible. And it's not to say the writers are incapable of noticing, but you're making the life easier. You're ensuring that the SEO best practices are met. And of course, even if they forget to do it, when they write the content, make sure you proofread it just so you know and you see that, okay, this link has been used correctly. Because again, you don't want to upload something and then remove it from the CMS and add it again. It's too long. So make sure you're actually going through the content after it's written. But adding that internal links, useful, so useful to the writers, so they don't have to ask you, do you want me to link to anything? No, it's already there. You see it and it's clear. And you can utilize softwares like SMrush. If you have your brand on there, you can see what pages are doing quite well, what pages are not doing quite well, to actually then decide what internal links should you do. Maybe the Omani page is not ranking so high, so let's add that in. Let's try to drive traffic also by internal linking to that particular landing page. Suggested word
Oh, hold
count.
on. I
Yeah,
I have some thoughts about
yeah.
external links, like how you mentioned how you might go about, I guess, figuring out what are some internal linking page opportunities using SEMrush or that kind of stuff. But how do you go about finding external link sources? And how does that process, I guess, work with the end client as well? Right? Because I feel like a lot of this becomes a little bit touchy where it's like, oh, okay, linking out to Hugo Boss is fine because, we write about fashion or something, but, linking out to this other website, we don't find okay. So how do you go about thinking about external links and what is the most important factors that you're looking for there? Because I guess in the slide, it kind of says like, this is to bolster the credibility of your site. So just wanted to think through, I guess, how your process looks when identifying some of those opportunities.
Absolutely. So how I sort of look at external links. I first also look at each of the client will have their generic competitors, for example. So I would then go into the competitor site just to have a look around in terms of let's say it's within their blog section. have a look around in terms of, okay, what other things do they talk about in relation to the topic I have? And then maybe I usually just copy the title of the blog and put it onto Google, and let's just see what comes up. Let's see what relevancy comes up in terms of my site. And again, it's quite manual the way I do it. So I'll go through the first page, second page, understand and reading the different type of keywords and use, the different type of topic, and I'll also have the MOZ domain authority. So it's always checking what the domain authority is for me, and then it always comes down to the relevancy of what I'm trying to say. So, for example, if the blog is approaching the topic from a more transactional perspective, I won't necessarily use that. Like, I think that information won't be useful for the readers. If it's approaching it in the way I'm approaching it, around navigational or informational, then yes, I can, rather than taking the domain, I can take the specific URL where you're putting information from or where you're trying to reference. So that's the process in which I will look at it. And just to kind of go off the question that Eva has just asked around footnoting and is great. Adding sources of section is great. But I think the purpose of those are mostly from a authority building perspective. So the purpose of those would be if your article is follows the EAT format or the EAT perspective, footnoting is actually amazing. So I think if you're working within sites that are around health, around certain fitness or whatever, you want to have those sources section, because what Google will do is Google will then see it, and it's a way kind of giving the authors a bit more credibility. I've seen people add author profiles or the accreditations of the writers. Amazing thing to do. Again, you're building up that authority. So that would be my answer.
Great. Yeah, I do. Do you have any strong opinions following up on this question that Eva asked about having the URL be a link versus having the URL just as a URL in the sources? You know what I'm like, the difference of what I'm like saying, because some people will just say, oh, number one, and then down at the bottom, sources one is the text of the URL versus having it actually link out to the URL itself. Strong opinions about whether or not that matters.
I think it matters if you are trying to attach it to a specific anchor text. I think just adding at the bottom, I think Google could just follow those links, which is great. But I think adding it to embedding it into a specific text, especially when the text is a primary keyword, then I think using that as an anchor text for yourself is a great strategy to do to link outwards, because then when Google reads it, and it has to be quite organic. So I think when you're putting it a source at the bottom, is not essentially, there's no context to the conversation.
Right.
There's no context to what you're writing, but when you're embedding it within the text, there's context around it. So Google didn't understand why it's been linked out here, because this is the topic you're talking about. Something as a footnote, I think all Google will see is you've written this topic and just given source links. That will be the conversation.
Yeah. Okay. So my takeaway here is basically, if we were to link out to a study that researchers at Harvard did to, prove some claim that we're making in the article, then basically maybe linking study done by Harvard researchers in 2020, and then have that be the anchor text that then links out to that study would be the way to provide the most context to Google for that particular thing. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to think about it, and this is is just taking it back to school days, how you would write an essay and do citations. It has to kind of be flowing with the conversation. And the thing with SEO is it has to be quite organic. So whilst we're talking about, we're talking about a particular study, and we can say, oh, a study made in 2020 by Harvard, and then you can link Harvard out, and then it's a citation there. What I have seen, especially around healthcare, is they've always added I forgot what the term is, use like a little number one at the corner of the word. And that is also linked into the footnote. So again, it's still kind of internally linked for Google to follow the link that you've added in the sources, in the source code at the bottom. That's another way to do it. But if not, yeah, just make sure it's within the conversation, it's giving context to the readers.
One follow-up question from Hannah, which is more or less talking about exactly this, which is opinions on linking from the site or organization name in the text versus, I feel like there's some people in Healthline, like specifically if you hovered over their one, there's like a little tooltip that comes out. What do you think about that user experience in terms of an external link compared to like an anchor text contextual external link?
I think that those like the little ones, I think from a user perspective, it's still followed by Google because it's still a link at the end of the day that's embedded in source code or whatever. I think the thing about from a user perspective is I'm not too sure how many users clicks on that to go follow up with the text. So it's up to you to decide, is this essentially the most user-friendly way to get our readers to understand the flow of conversation, but it's also a great way to show you have authority because in essence you are utilizing credible sources. So I think it doesn't matter either way. And to answer the question in terms of does Google understand what footnotes are? Footnotes will essentially come across as links that Google just has to follow. So yes, footnotes is you can say, oh, Harvard 2022, but all Google knows is Harvard 2022 and follow this link. But then if, for example, if there's a chunk talking about a particular health topic and you added Harvard 2022, it reads as though according to Harvard and it follows. So Google again understand the context of that text, understand what you're trying to say, why you're leading your readers here. A footnote is just essentially providing all the links to your sources, which is great. It's still an external link, but again, everything's around context. Google will see it as how the user experience will see it. I feel links are better embedded in a conversational, in a contextual way. So as a reader, I know what he's talking about. I know that this study is relating to this section of your content, rather than a random study in a footnote.
Awesome. Lots of good discussion here about linking internally, externally, all that good stuff. All right, I guess one more on this. Are footnotes less desirable because they are less accessible?
In a way, you can say that. Yeah, in terms of accessibility, if what's it called, a voice text reader was to say it wouldn't read well if you're just hearing it back, because what will happen is they'll just read out all the links, Harvard 2020, and read that link, they'll just keep reading out the link. So accessibility, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because absolutely it is better within the text. And sometimes in content briefs, especially when people add maybe tables or within their site, so images of tables, and they have a link to it. What I have seen done is quite clever is they'll add an image, the alt text will be a normal alt text with a keyword, but they'll make sure that they reference that image within within a text above, and then link into the study that image came from. So again, from an accessibility point of view, it's easily readable. So you have to understand, how are people going to read this in a natural flowing way? So I would agree. I think they're probably less desirable because accessibility wise, it's very difficult.
Great answer. Okay, one more. I'd love if there were a set of style rules or best practices for linking and anchor text. Do you have a link or a resource that you?
I don't have anything called resource, but I would say that one of the things I've learned around LinkedIn, I guess what people do is people link for the sake of linking and not link for the sake of relevancy, topical relevancy, keyword relevancy, I guess brand relevancy. So you just don't want to link because, hey, this site has 98 authority, let me link. It has to make sense because, there's no point embedding a link. Another thing in terms of anchor text is ensuring your anchor text derives from a good keywords. And an anchor text doesn't have to be one word. It can be long tail word or short tail, but it's again very relevant, very relevant to your to whatever link you're going to attach to that anchor text. Google does pick that up as well. So those would be the best practices I've sort of used in my experience.
Awesome. So I feel like what I've kept hearing over and over again is link when it makes sense, when what you're writing about and what you're linking to actually really helps the user get more clarity or get more information about whatever it is that you want them to see. So don't link for the sake of linking. Link when it makes sense from a common sense perspective, and as long as it's relevant, it'll likely do well.
Yeah. And thanks for providing that URL. I'm actually going to read that because I didn't know there was actually link calls.
Yes.
Which is always great to learn, because I think linking is something that's huge for people.
Yep. Very cool. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. So in terms of suggested word count, I would always put in a suggested word count within your briefs, just so your writers know, are you trying to, do a 2,000 words, 300 words, and also it makes you think about the topic. So if you're writing a topic that's quite informational, let's say the keyword you have is informational, is a 300 words blog suitable for something that's informational? Probably not. So you probably need to extend the word count. It does give you an idea, and also how much that content is going to cost. If you're paying your writers, cost per word, then 2,000, you can work out how much that's going to cost you, around about those figures. And in essence of adding a call to action, a CTA, it makes you think two things. It makes you think about the actions you want your user to take. So download this, or buy, or whatever, explore now, certain actions you want the user to take. And it also makes you think about the action realistically your user is willing to take. And this again will coincide in informational. If your content is about informational, do you want to add a CTA? Probably not, because your users are not there yet. They won't be willing to take that if they're just trying to know about an information. So you have to think about your call to action, and add it to your brief will help you be a bit more realistic in terms of where your user is within your buyer's journey. Are they in the awareness stage? Are they in the consideration stage? Are they in the decision stage? Then you know where you need to add that CTA. Most likely decision stage. So awareness stage, you can say, let's forego a CTA, and let's add that in. Create you can create different content that fits those stages, but the CTA will be added to the brief for the decision stage. So that's how you can think about call to actions. And formatting and outline. This is quite important. So how I've seen it done is the formatting and outline can be, again, which headings are the H1s, the H2s, the H3s. Again, you want to educate your clients and users how they should be thinking about SEO. So I've seen a brief where they had 4 H1s, and realistically, to all other people, looks okay. But we all know in SEO, multiple H1s on one page is not friendly, it's really bad. So again, it allows you to break it up. What's a H2? What's a H1? A best practice, a really good trick I learned was that your H1 should definitely have your main priority keyword within that H1. You should absolutely have it in there. Your H2s, it doesn't have to have a keyword, but let it be. It can have a keyword if you want it, but it's not necessarily too fussy. H3s, you don't have to add a keyword there. And also there should be at least maybe one H1, maybe 3 or 4 H2s as the subheadings. H3s can be another subheading within the H2. So it should be quite flowy, quite structured. And if you have that within the brief, so let's say you know what the headings you want them to be, structure it for your writers so they can see clearly the vision you're trying to have. Again, and because it follows a flow of conversation, a flow of topic. So you have to put yourself in your reader's shoes. How are they going to read this content? You know, you don't want to jump from one topic to another, so ensure that the H1, H2s, H3s coincide. In terms of formatting, I will also think about like I said earlier, the type of content. So how you would, structure a blog might be different to how you structure a an infographic, or maybe a short post, or maybe a guide. So you're thinking about the format of the content you want someone to write. It's very, very important to kind of give you a clear chance of ranking for that targeted keyword. Because then if someone searches, if you're providing a guide, or maybe a blog, and you want to answer particular questions, I don't know if people are aware of the zero results. So if, for example, I ask the question, oh, when did Boris Johnson become prime minister? So within your own blog, if you've written a blog around, the British politics, whatever, and within that, you might have had that Boris Johnson became prime minister it's like your directly answer. Zero click searches, Google might just, because it's so direct and you structured it so well, might pull that information out and answer the query for the user, and the user would know exactly where it came from. Again, you're structuring your content in order to answer specific questions, and your outline should follow the way in which you want to answer that particular topic.
Awesome. We have one question actually about your previous slide of calls to action. And Tom asks, will a call to action in an informational article negatively impact your Google rank? So I think you could think of it as if you had, a sign up for our webinar, or, learn more and download our ebook, like in your, how to do SEO guide. Is that, do you feel like that's going to be a negative detractor? How many of them is too many of them? What's the right tasteful way to insert your commercial business?
Absolutely. I don't think it would negatively impact your ranking. I don't think it would really impact the ranking in any way. I see it more so from a user perspective. I see it more from a user experience. Like, if I want something informational, so if, for example, if a call to action would be, maybe you've added, I guess if I'm looking for an information and you have written it on your content, as a user, if I've answered what I was looking for, am I really going to download the guides to learn more? I've already found my answer. So you have to think about why you're putting that in. So unless you're holding back information, there's more to find out, absolutely great, add it in. But as a user, you have to ask yourself, okay, realistically, will users actually download this ebook if I've answered all the questions that they have, or I've given them quite a detailed response already in my content, and I've said, sign up, download this ebook. I wouldn't say sign up, because informational might not be to take an action, which is to signing up is to take an action. That's not essentially what I'm looking for. So if it's an informational content, I don't think your users would want to sign up, because that is essentially them having to do something to then find out more information. I think sign up could be if you are writing something that's more commercial, more transactional, and they might want to buy something. So again, that could push them to sign up to find out more ways and more things about a product or services for them to buy. So think about your CTA not from a ranking perspective, but just for my users. Will they realistically do what I need them to do? If my query is informational, if my query is this, that's how you can essentially approach it and look at it when you do call to actions. Don't do more than two. I think more than two call to actions is a bit pushy. I think it's like forcing them to do something. Realistically, I think one is fine, maybe one at the end. You can allude to your ebook over time. But I think the specific call to action should be towards either the end, or maybe there's a button where they can say enroll now, sign up now, but not more than two. You don't want to be pushy.
Makes sense to me.
Awesome. So now that we've understood what goes in an SEO content brief around all these key things. I'm going to take you in terms of some key takeaways as well. So we've now reached the key takeaways. So part one of the key takeaways when we're looking at keywords, again, one thing I want you guys to remember is Google has a way of understanding semantics behind search queries. It is our job as marketers to also understand that and also serve that query in the content that we make. In regards to audience, now I've always wondered, should we add the target audience within the briefs? You can, and it will be beneficial. So if you're writing a technical brief around maybe how to get started with data science, your target audience will be beginners. Your target audience will be people who are looking to get into data science. So you wouldn't target people who are already in the advanced stage, already in that business. So understanding your target audience is who are you writing for? That could help your writers. Who exactly are we writing for? Are we writing for people who are already in this industry, or writing for people who are also trying to get into it? And understanding your audience will help you understand what questions you need to answer, and also maybe help you in what kind of keyword research you need to do. So what kind of keywords would you be looking for? What should become your primary keywords? Because we are writing for beginners. So knowing your audience is good. And maybe if you do not know your audience, let's say, for example, this brief or this instruction came from the marketing team. They want to write, they want you to create a content brief for them because they want to write a particular topic. Maybe ask your marketing team, do you have a persona of the reader in your head? What does the reader do? Do you have a buyer's persona or reader's persona? Again, that is part of the audience. What type of person do you expect to read this? Knowing that will help you then create the briefs in order for it to actually be read by that persona, that type of person that they have in mind. Another one is the outline. Again, as I said before, it refers to the H1s or H2s. Think about that when you're writing. Point out where the image will be. So if, for example, you have not given an asset and you think an asset like an image would be great to have here to visually represent what you're talking about, think about where would you place that? How would you place it? And if you do have the assets, maybe add in an alt text. Maybe add in that picture that's going to be used in the brief. Not saying that the writers are going to upload it, but so they can have a visual understanding of what the surrounding text should look like. Maybe add that image and add the alt text you're thinking of using. Again, you're still educating people about SEO within the content briefs. The content briefs it should be something that you can give to anyone, and they can say, I know exactly what you want to do because it's clearly stated. I know what H1s should use. I know the images you want to use, what the alt text should be. So I know what to write about this image. I know what to write about this heading. That's what a content brief is set up to do. Part two is links again. We talk about links. List out any URLs on your site that mentions your topic. That's again relevant. That's that can be in your category, that can be in your navigation, anything. So list it out. See what's relevant. See how that's performing on the site. If it's performing quite well, do we need to really link it? If there's another link that is more important and not doing so well, so then you can use that as a link instead. So subtopics. So ensure your writers cover several subtopics. Certain content, certain topics might have subtopics within it. So for example, how to get started in data science. So you can write about data science, but there are subtopics around what programming language should data science learn. And you can write about Python, React. So you're thinking about all the subtopics that could be covered. So within your article, how to get started in data science, you might talk about the importance of using Python and React to learn about data science. All of those things, you're thinking about the different type of subtopics, which will help you then research a more broader keyword research to see what can become the final research, what you can use as secondary research. And don't forget about the funnel stages. So the toe through, bow through. So top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. So you want to think about where you are in terms of your the funnel stage. So in terms of, I would say, so the toe through would be the main keywords where you absolutely want to use it at the beginning of the content. You know, that should be essentially how it helps you frame your content. It helps you understand that for these keywords is going to be top of the funnel. This is what, you know, is most targeted. We want people to focus around this main informational keyword. This is essentially what the target is. Middle of the funnel, you can, I guess, you know, relax in the sense of it should be more educational. The content in the middle facilitates any sort of evaluation. So you'll want people to now evaluate, I guess, the introduction, what you're going to write about. That will be where a lot of the content will be. You want to be as useful. You want to be as, you know, clear with these sort of keywords. And the bottom of the funnel is, again, if you are trying to do transactional content, you want all the conversion keywords at the bottom, because you want to leave them with purchase. You want to leave them with download. You want to leave them with sign up. That will be the conversion keywords. So again, having those within the content briefs can actually help you to see what keywords we're going to utilize all throughout. But doesn't mean these keywords are vastly different. Remember, I said there are variation keywords. Keywords that have variations, so you can split those variations into tofu, bofu, and it means utilize them all throughout. But what do we need to avoid? We have to avoid certain things. And I guess when you're creating content briefs, you should have boundaries in place. And I say boundaries because you don't want to avoid suggestions after the fact. That is why we need to make sure the content brief is clear. We need to know exactly what's going in there. Suggestions after the fact can be, again, you can start that whole back and forth thing. And you don't want to you know, have that back and forth, you know, conversation. You don't always want to focus on high search volume. The reason why I say that is if you're confused or you're struggling to understand intent, the best way to understand intent is go for more long tail keywords, but they will be lower search volumes. Don't ignore lower search volume keywords, because those keywords can be more specific to your niche. And they may not be high. It doesn't mean they're bad. Again, if you're doing it in tofu, mofu, bofu, those short search or low search volume keywords can be within the middle of the funnel. They can be within there. You can add it there. So let's not always focus on high search volumes. Tools are not good. Tools are always good, but they're not perfect. So you can utilize tools to help you understand search's intent, to help you understand, okay, this keyword is attached to this intent. But again, intent can change over time. So an intent can be informational in 2021, but it becomes transactional in 2022. And that's because seasons change. And because seasons change, keywords can change. So, you know, I may not search for sales things between, you know, let's say April, May, June. But when it comes to November, I might search for good sales deals. I might search for all of this stuff because that's when the Black Friday is. So again, keywords change consistently and the intent changes consistently. And sometimes the tools may not pick that up. So you still want to manually check if that's the right thing. So if a tool says this keyword is transactional and you put that into Google, but you're not seeing transactional content coming up, question that. Ask yourself, okay, so is this keyword going to be relevant in my, my brief? And again, we want to involve our content team. And the reason why is, and how you do that is bring them into your planning process. Make sure that they understand the process you're using, they understand what you're doing. Don't hold back results from them. Show them exactly the results you're getting from the contents that you've done, so they can, it gives you a bit more credibility. And always respect the knowledge. They know a lot about the content, especially if you're coming from SEO. Sometimes they do have expertise in their field. Let's respect that and join it with what we're doing and understand how we can work in the synergy. And that brings me to a close. And thank you guys so much for having me and listening to me. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that wonderful wisdom. As you were talking, I was just like, oh yes, like, intent changes, and oh yes, like search intent is very important and provide value. And you were just singing my words. I'm like, ah, yes, like Reggie gets it. She knows SEO. I was blown away with the depth of, I think, your understanding of SEO. And as somebody who's been practicing SEO for the last decade, I feel like you actually have a much better sense of what's important, because a lot of people who were practicing from a long time ago have this warped view of technical SEO and backlinks and all this baggage, right? That yes, it used to work, but does it work now? It's like, yeah, I mean, a little bit, but you really got to think about what you're doing and why that's valuable to the end user. So a couple of questions. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna answer the question. I was gonna say, I don't have a template. I'm so sorry. I don't have a template that with everything I've suggested. I should have created one.
Should have created one. It's okay. Maybe that'll be the first resource on ReggieOjiaku.com. That's a CTA that people will be like, of course, this is what I
No,
need.
absolutely, I agree. And for the next and for other question in terms of should we preempt seasonal changes? I would say yes, you should, but not in the sense of you should create more than one brief for each of the intent. I would say you can pre-plan and you can plan ahead in advance. So, for example, utilizing Google Keyword Planner, what it does is it shows you how the keyword volume changes over time. So whether in Feb it peaks, whether in March it drops or whatever. So you can plan it out in that way. So you can maybe have a content brief that you created for, I don't know, Mother's Day watches. And we all know Mother's Day watches come around in March. And after March, it changes. The intent completely changes. It moves from, informational and transactional, and maybe just people just want to like navigate to a site. So you can actually kind of like preempt the seasonal changes by just looking at how the search volume peaks and drops and whatever, and then you can create things in advance. And actually, if you know certain seasons, this is what the intent is for this keyword, maybe a month before, have that brief ready, because because we all plan content. We all plan content in always like a content calendar. It's always like marketing team has seasonal calendars, content calendars. So you can utilize that and think of, okay, well, I know my company or this company is going to launch this product in this way. What are the keywords around it? This launch coming out in September. Let me plan ahead and see how the intent might change. What is it now? What will it be in September? And that way you can actually then decide when to create that content brief before that keyword.
Yeah, I got an interesting follow-up question to this idea of preempting seasonal change. When would you refresh your existing piece of content versus create multiple pieces of content? So like, for example, you could imagine if I'm planning a trip to Japan, and I could see a world where having 4 separate pieces of content for best things to do in Japan during the spring, the summer, the fall, the winter makes a lot of sense to have 4 like separate ones like spread out. Whereas I could imagine if you were creating a piece of content for Black Friday, that maybe it's something where, throughout the course of the year, it just talks about what Black Friday is, why, people drop their prices so significantly. And then, the 1 month leading up to it, it just turns into like a Black Friday's like best places to find deals kind of thing. So what's your thoughts and opinions about creating separate ones to target the evolution of an intent versus going back to an existing piece of content and updating it to fit the intent?
I would prefer, what I usually do is we just repurpose the content that's already there. So I would always prefer in terms of the Black Friday deal. So usually what, within the content, a lot of clients call out a specific year. So they might say Black Friday 2021. I wouldn't call the year out in the URL. Never put the year in the URL, only because if you repurpose, now you have to do a redirection because the URL is different. So you can call it out with the title, Black Friday's deals in 2021. And then next year, we'll repurpose it, remove 2021, change up the content, change up the information in there, Black Friday deals 2022. It's still the same landing page. It's still the same page. And what you can do is then utilize off-page SEO, your social media, start pushing that out. That's a new content. And if the intent has changed, you can always change the keywords. Just repurpose what you have, read what you have. I think it's very difficult to create content for like different seasonal changes because eventually you might start without realizing duplicating information because certain information may just not change. So you might just start causing duplications because you have 4 of the similar type of information of based on the season. It's always best to see what content that you can repurpose and then just change the content within it, change the assets that you have within it. That's an easier way to go about it. I'm a huge fan of content repurposing. I think it's much easier. You don't have to be this creative person. Just look at the data. What is data telling you? What's intent telling you? Change it. Yeah, and that's how I would approach it.
Makes sense. Yeah. It is a lot easier to get faster results when you do refresh or repurpose existing content because it's already been in the index and Google might have put a little bit more weight behind it than launching a brand new page that could in some ways have some intent cannibalization with your existing page that's servicing the less evolved version of what the topic is evolving, and then Google's like, okay, this one or that one, I'm not sure, right?
Yeah, that's true. I agree.
Yeah. All right, one last question and then we'll close it out. This one looks like a very interesting and tricky one. As Google algorithms trended towards rewarding unique content creation or markers of authority, like footnotes to prioritizing, original illustrations, wondering how sites increasingly using the same heading structures, H2s, H3s, and content formats will affect the big picture. So you got put on your clairvoyance hat here and predict the future here.
I think Google has created algorithms to, I guess, reward sites that follow the your money, your life, the YAML, structure, the EAT structure. A lot of EAT or YAML type content. Google rewards them quite a lot because again, that it requires quite a high level of authority in essence, and because these sites tends to prove where the information is coming from by adding footnotes, by adding studies, by adding all these links that are linking into credible sites, as well as I think that's why they can get away with maybe not necessarily changing the H1s or H2s. They don't change it as much because the content within it is so packed with credibility, so packed with the utilizing the keywords, especially around healthcare, fintech, those sort of spaces. It's very difficult if you work in an e-commerce sites or maybe you're a beauty brand. You're not necessarily seen as YAML unless you're doing skincare for health. Then maybe you can. That's the only way I've seen Google reward these kind of unique content creators. But also Google does reward repurposing content. There have been content that a lot of their sites have changed that's done much better because what it allowed them to do is be more specific in the niche that they're trying to target for. So that would be my answer. I don't know if it's the answer, but that's how I would assume that Google has, because I have working on sites that have the YAML or the E structure. They've seen a lot of good rewards because they just stick to that authority, that trust, and stick to utilizing footnotes and prioritizing images, videos, and all those things.
Yeah. If I were to take a stab at this, because I do think this one is very interesting. It's also a nod towards what we help with at ClearScope, which analyzes top results to give people recommendations on what they should be talking about. I feel like this is it depends situation. So during the presentation, Reggie, you brought up this idea that, look, if everybody more or less agrees that something is, something, right? Like, a dog has 4 legs, then Google's quick answer or featured snippet is literally going to say, if somebody Googled how many legs does a dog have, 4. So in that particular model, I feel like what we're seeing in the search engine results page is sort of a reflection of society's view on the topic.
Yeah.
If we all have converged upon the same idea that smoking cigarettes is bad, then I think that you're going to see more or less, right, 8 to 10 results that talk about why smoking cigarettes is bad and talking about lung cancer, carcinogens, and that kind of stuff. And that's going to make a ton of sense. However, right, if you're writing content where there's a lot more, we'll say, controversy or split like ideas that society hasn't converged upon, then you're going to see, in my opinion, content results where Google is prioritizing, maybe 20% talking about, what if this happens, or 20% talking about, why this is bad, and 20% talking about why this is good. And you'll see this spread of content results from a diversity standpoint. So I would say the best way that I can articulate what is happening is that Google probably has some level of, we'll call it like understanding of how split or divergent a topic is related to how society is looking for it, which is based on how many like additional searches a user has to perform when they displayed a search engine results page that had converged, right? You can imagine somebody's looking for, say, a controversial subject like abortion. And if Google literally displayed 10 results saying abortion is good, then they're going to have a lot of people who are like, wait, hold on, right? I want to know why abortion is bad. And they'll go back to Google because they only saw 10 results saying abortion is good and say, Google, why is abortion bad? And then, get there, and Google's going to look at that user behavior and say, okay, well, clearly 10 results saying this is not good, because lots of people are going back to Google to requery. So let's then introduce some of these other divergent perspectives. And I think that's how you see this happen. And this is also a nod towards what Reggie was saying, right? Is that intent changes over time. We could be in a world now where we're all thinking like that, but 5 months down the road, 5 years down the road, we could be in a whole new world where we're thinking something completely different.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I think I'm absolutely right. Yeah.
Cool. All righty. Well, Reggie, true pleasure having you. I think I can say for everybody, this is a wonderful presentation, and thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. No, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Well, I'll follow up with you over email. If I could get your slides, that'd be great. I'd love to see them.
I'll send it over to you.
Okay. Take care. Stay safe.
See. Bye.